Hello, I'm Liam Finn, and you're watching The Departure Lounge live here at Webster Hall, New York City. About a month ago, when we were in the middle of our European tour, we got a message from, my brother Elroy got a message from Stella saying that they were going on tour and looking for someone for some of these dates. And actually, I feel like half of my friends have been on the road with Warpaint before. I think Connan Mockasin, who my brother used to play with, has toured with them, and EJ and Cece, who are from Australia, know Stella from way back. So it just sort of seemed like a fateful thing to end up on the road with them.
Like the Aussie connection.
Yeah, we're all connected somehow, but no, it's nice. It's really nice. I mean, I've met them here and there and seen them at festivals and stuff, but never got to play with them. So this is really going to be fun. Well, a lot of these songs actually started from the beats, and I was kind of exploring just different ways of trying to write songs. Writing from sounds and writing from beats rather than chord sequences. And writing on guitar has sort of gotten a little bit dull, or at least it was a few years ago, a bit dull to me. So I sort of wrote from a few different. Even though the I and 4-Track Stomper are completely different, they were both actually started as a beat-driven song, and I just sort of mucked around on them until they took some sort of shape. And I think the album did turn out actually incredibly diverse, but it sort of represented the nature of this city that I'm living in, and the fact that it's frantic and there's lots going on, but there is some sort of common thread that links it all together somehow. Snug as Fuck sort of has kind of a weird duality, and that's what the video that I made with these friends, Anthony and Alex, they kind of were the first ones to pick up on the fact that it made them at once sort of really happy and joyous, but at the same time a bit uneasy and a bit kind of creeped out or something. But I'm not really sure how it happened. I mean, it was written kind of as a sort of trying to be a bit sort of softly sung and sort of soul-y sort of song, and it probably wasn't until I recorded it and I left this whole section at the end open to a guitar solo, and it wasn't until it was like a really beautiful evening and the sun was streaming in the windows and I'd timed it perfectly. I was like, now is the time for the Snug as Fuck guitar solo, and that was when the most joyous part of the song sort of for me came to life, and then the strings, I put the strings on it and stuff like that, and it turned into this really psychedelic, beautiful thing. But I think before that it probably was leaning to creepy, but I don't know, I have no control over these things. It seems like you just, you throw it at the wall and you see what sticks.
So you yourself are having like a subconscious thought when you're writing your music, I guess.
I guess so. I mean, you sort of don't really. I don't really plan what I kind of imagine what the end result will be in my head, and quite often it's a little bit more visual than it is oral. I don't necessarily know what I want it to sound like until the sound is already there, and it's quite often more of an atmosphere and almost a visual and imagery based thing. Yeah. I'm not sure. I mean, I think I've always made music that has ended up being quite eclectic and hard to know. I mean, at early stages of this record, I kind of didn't know whether it was going to fit together, and whether I was maybe a bit, running into the same problem I have in the past, where I've tried to make such a wide variety of things work as one project or work as one album, but there seemed to be a point where I was like, it's me, it's the way obviously my mind works musically and stuff like that. So I'm not really sure. I mean, I really love experimenting with sounds and songs and doing things that, quite often songs that seem like they should be really simple and like a pop song, I kind of end up destroying for myself, my own benefit, just to sort of feel like I'm making it interesting for myself. But then there's some that are just best left, and I think Helena Bonham Carter was definitely one that it just needed to feel right. It needed to have that kind of. I wanted to make it somewhere between, like the Billie Jean drum beat and then that ODB song, "Baby I Got Your Money." That just when those songs come on at clubs, people instantly just start bobbing their head, and I knew that song needed something like that. And then whereas with other songs, you kind of the exciting part of it is recording as many of the ideas that come to your head and then stripping things away and carving it away to sort of make it sound like its own story, its own beast. Yeah, I think after doing a bunch of touring with a band and with a bunch of people that I felt really comfortable with musically and inspired by musically, I really wanted to make something that was a collaborative thing, or at least a bit more of a band effort, because sometimes those things that people bring to the table that are unpredictable and something that I wouldn't do quite often are, the exciting thing that just kicks the song into being finished. You can, especially on your own, work things into the ground and just analyze them and overwork them. And in some ways, I probably still ended up really working a lot on these songs after we recorded them as a band. But I think I went into it thinking this will be a really organic live record, and we did a bunch of the tracking as a band, and we'd worked out these songs and they were sounding really good. But I don't know whether it was the way we recorded them or whether it was just the way that the band was playing them. It didn't have the atmosphere that I was hoping for, and so I think that was the point where I realized I needed to take it back into my own hands and sort of just massage the fat out of them until they resembled what I was first envisaging, and it got there, and it was agonizing, but I think it really got to the point where it inhabited this otherworldly dimension. Yeah, actually, that was because when I was about maybe about 14, 13, I went to Vietnam with my father, and we saw this person playing it on the street, and managed to find out where we could buy one, and ever since then it's found its way onto both of our records. Probably not played in the correct way, and then that's the thing about instruments, is that it's, in my opinion, they're open to interpretation, and you can kind of make a sound out of anything if you really try. And I'll go as far as to claim that was an instrument I knew how to play. So, yeah, to my own standard, as a disclaimer should be at the bottom of the bio.
I mean, like, I was listening to this one famous demo tune, and I mean, all these tunes seem to be way slower, but then in that song, it was like on steroids. It was like
Oh, right. Yeah, no, I'm not. Maybe I'm not sure if that's the part where I used it, but I'll let the mystery live. Well, the first time I ever saw Connan, when it was just before I moved to England with my old band, and I went to a Connan and the Mockasin show just up the road from where my parents lived, and I met the rest of the band, but I didn't meet Connan. He was sitting in the corner of the room with his blonde mop, drinking whiskey out of a bottle, and I was really intimidated by him. I thought, who's this guy? He's pretty cool and sort of seemed scary, it's funny how you're intimidated by just the unknown. And then I moved to England, and about 6 months later, or maybe a year later, Connan and the Moccasins moved to the UK, and they were living I'd heard that they were in town, and they were living just down the road. And then one day, during my band's last band practice before we broke up, was right when things were very heated, the doorbell was ringing, and it just happened to be Connan just arrived to say hi, and I thought that was very, very nice and very bold of him just to turn up at our house and introduce himself. But I found out later that the reason why he turned up was because someone had told him that we'd turned up at his house to meet him, and he wasn't there, and so he thought he was just returning the call, but we hadn't. Anyway, it all worked out, and then we very quickly became quite infatuated with each other. And I don't know. I think from early on we just found it quite inspiring to hang out and come up with silly ideas and talk about our dreams and music that we wanted to make, and you know, and he continues to be someone that I always get a lot of energy out of talking about stuff with him. Not so much on a musical level, but just on a what is inspiring us and what is exciting us, and he's a special guy. Well, during our time of living in London together, and Connan and the Moccasins were sort of doing lots of shows around, and I was just starting to do a solo thing on my own, and our other friend that was living in an apartment with me, Lawrence Arabia, was playing shows, and we all sort of started having the odd jam together, and had right when I was first demoing up my first record, I'll Be Lightning, we did a session with Connan's drummer Seamus, him and Lawrence Arabia, and we tackled some of my songs, but it ended up just in a drunk sort of slop of a jam, which was really fun. But we always planned from that moment on that we would at some point make a record together, the four of us. And then over the few years of me touring my solo stuff with EJ, who sings with me, she became part of the family, and she was singing in Lawrence Arabia Once Upon a Time and blah blah blah. But we finally had about 3 months back in New Zealand where we weren't touring the rest of the world, and so I booked in a studio, and we spent a month, the five of us, writing and recording a record that we sort of perversely titled Barb, because we were sort of calling each other Barb. I'm not really sure where it came from. It had some bad connotations for some people, but we very quickly grew fond of the name. But yeah, we made this record, and it kind of went largely unnoticed at that point, but it's a really cool. I'm really proud of it, and it was something that I can listen to and not feel like it's my project, so I can get a lot of enjoyment out of listening to it myself. So check it out. Yeah, EJ's still singing with me. Elroy, my brother's playing drums, and we have EJ's best friend Cece playing keyboards and singing, and we've got Elroy's best friend Jimmy playing bass. And Jimmy's going out with EJ, and now Cece's going out with Matt, my old drummer from Betch Duper, and Elroy's my brother, so we can't go out, but it's kind of as much like Fleetwood Mac as I could get it.
Oh, so
Yeah.
speaking of Beshtupa, do you still listen to some of the songs every now and then? Even though
Every now and then, I listen to some Betch Duper. We recently had a song just got licensed for television in New Zealand, so that was kind of exciting. 10 years after the last record came out, a song's having a new life. But no, I think the last time I listened to it was actually at Connan's last Brooklyn show, and we were in the backstage room with all these interesting, cool young people, and Connan went and put on Betch Duper as a sort of kind of like he likes little giggly jokes. It wasn't a joke, I mean, he was being friendly, but it was quite funny to listen to it, maybe 14 years later in Brooklyn in a smoky dressing room with a bunch of other musicians. It was very, very surreal to hear 17-year-old me singing. Yeah, feels like a different life. Yeah, New Zealand's a very different place to Brooklyn. I mean, but at the same time, everywhere's relatively similar, and in some ways I feel like Brooklyn and as a whole probably is about the size of, well, at least population-wise, of New Zealand. So, I mean, it is a far more intense and competitive place, but I think that ultimately that is a really good thing for musicians, well, at least for me anyway, is not necessarily the competitiveness, but the pace of the city, and the fact that you really have to, keep yourself busy, and you got to do it to the best of your ability, because that's the only way to kind of stand out in the crowd. But I don't know, I mean, I've always found this place inspiring, and I found America inspiring in general, but New York especially has always been a place that I feel like creating stuff, and New Zealand's a really beautiful and creative, inspiring country in its own way, but I find getting away from it is a lot easier to realize the things that you're trying to create. And yeah, I mean, I love going home for summer in New Zealand because it's when it's winter here as well, but I don't know, I think I'll probably stick it out here as long as I can, just purely because it seems like I'm walking around in Ghostbusters every day.
Alright, well, thank you so much for your time, and that's it on tonight.
Thanks for having me.